Hello, welcome. This is Storyboards by Stuff Pop, where story becomes art and art becomes story. I'm Josh, and this is my video about panel design. Before we get started, you can go find Uptown Undertale and Juniper's Long Day, my two 10-page black and white comics bundled for 99 cents over at Gumroad. That's gumroad.com/stuffpopcomics. And if you're interested in more comics making process videos, please subscribe. So this video is just as much about layouts and composition as it is about panel design, but they're all very intertwined or interconnected when it comes to a storytelling and a design point of view. Like the panel design, the panels are a tool for a page layout ultimately, and you can do a lot of different things with them, even for similar page layouts. But they're still very interconnected with that, and then the composition too. Like the panel frames the scene. The composition is completely dependent on the area you're working within. But with this video in particular, I want to talk about a few different approaches between my three comics right now, Juniper's Long Day, Uptown Undertale, and the In Progress Less is More, for how I approached a couple pages that I think have some unique or just different approaches to panel design. So let's start out with Juniper's Long Day, page 3, right here. And this is our introduction to Pip Goldings. And he is the co-time traveler who came back in time with Juniper. And we get to see that he brought back, as a cliche, he brought back information, the winning lottery numbers, other various bets, horse racing, and a bunch of sports bets, as we see later, and stuff like that. And he's already won the lottery. He's already taken advantage of that. But he's trying to capitalize even further, but he fails. The timeline has changed. The horse who was supposed to win the race, or who won the race in his future, did not this time. So it's an introduction to Pip here. And it's, so as I've done with introductions in the past, and you may have seen in my page 1 video, the first pages video, I like doing it a bit more third-person, cinematic type approach to things. So it's following Pip as he goes to place his bet, and gives a lot of these zoomed in shots to give some ideas of what's going on, to fill in the blanks for the environment of the situation. So yeah, it shows him there at the top placing the bet, then shows his bank account that he's already won a bunch of money before, and it shows his conniving, scheming smile and his little notebook with all the bets or the information he'd brought back. And then it goes to a different horse winning the race and him being dumbfounded, shocked. But there are a couple different things going on here. The diagonal panels are useful for what I'm doing in this page because they cut off the scene at an irregular, or they cut off the frames at an irregular shape. They obscure the view of what's going on. So from an introduction to a scene, from a very, again, third person, out of Pip's perspective approach to this, that makes sense. I think that works very well. And then the other unique part of this page is the out of panel Pip at the bottom right. And I think that works in a couple ways. Partially to show just watching the horse race in the background is very much a background. It's the next progression of things. And to zoom in on the shock here, it's partially also just like a cool design thing. I think it looks cool to have him overlapping with the panel and have this zoomed in upshot, taking up it gives me a lot more space on the page to work with if he's not within a little panel there in the bottom right corner, or has to like be behind the panel, the box that the horse is in. Let's go into the Uptown Undertale page 8. And this is when Pepita is helping Tolly out with babysitting. And with this is kind of a pivotal moment in the story in that she has her dual parallel stories working with Vera and Donald Gerhardt, and getting an idea of the end-of-life experience there with Donald, but him still being optimistic looking forward. And then she gets life from the opposite point of view, from a baby, and getting some insight into life from the beginning. And kind of in both situations, there's a sense of, this person is helpless. Either one, they're facing their death very soon, or two, in the case of this infant, that he's a helpless little infant. But it's not necessarily that. They're both taking their own agency, and she's learning that and using it to help process her own grandma's death. So this is a pivotal point of the story, And I think I was able to do some cool things with the panels to help tell dynamically what's going on. So everything on this page is about the horizontal work. The top panel, the dialog boxes are horizontal, and you have to read them separately, and it shows the passage of time or the motions across the page. So as you read it, you kind of feel that the baby is crawling forward towards Pepita's arms. But then the middle row of panels, the horizontal panels again show the passage of time, but because they're broken up into three, I can show three separate actions. Baby falling, Pepita reaching out, the baby picking himself back up. And then the third line, and why it makes sense to put Pepita's retracting hand at that line instead of the line above, is because it's not necessarily this in that sequence of actions. It is a reaction to that sequence, a reaction to that little scene right there. And again, with the bottom right two panels, her looking at the window and introspecting and thinking about life and death is another reaction to what's happened. And it's also setting up a scene transition for flipping the page and the passage of time for flipping the page into what's going on the next page. Another important thing with how this page is laid out and how these panels are set up is the narration boxes, how they aren't all vertically aligned. And that is another thing to demonstrate the passage of time or movement across the panels, and bringing the reader's eyes up and down as well as horizontally, I think contributes to, firstly looking at everything in the scene, but also just filling out what the experience of the time is, the sequence of events is going on here. And now let's go over to the page from Less is More. This is Less is More, page 9, and the top half of the page is LES. She's in this limbo purgatory room, and she finds her late mother there. But her late mother is effectively just a soul waiting to be called, waiting to pass on to the afterlife. So she can't really reach out to her or interact with her there. And you clearly see that there is some lack of resolution between Pepita and her relationship with her mother. And there's a bit more insight into that later in the story. But this is ultimately the introduction to it and shows one of the things that's going on in Pepita's head and one of the things she has to move past or help process in order to move on with her life is the death of her mother. And then the bottom half of the page follows the nurse sitting down at the computer, and the next page will go into some more of her own dashed hopes and dreams from her life to reflect onto LDS ultimately. But how this page is set up is very intentional. And you can see on the right there with the little thumbnail drawing for a page layout, it's ultimately just set up for what's going to take place on the page. There's no real design or real panel layout for how to read the page or how to create the page into a sequential comic book story. And I took those events, the beginning and the end, and reworked it into what you see here. And with the top panel, the intent of it being an open panel, not having borders, is that it sets the scene a little bit better. It gives us a bit more broader scope into the environment and isn't just a single event or action necessarily. And then with the three middle panels, how they're offset vertically, the point of that is similarly to what we were looking at with the Uptown Undertale page, is how Pepita's hand retracting was a reaction to the previous line of panels, the central row of panels. This is another instance of the next line both being in sequence, both being an action, but also being a reaction. So LES looking at her mother, trying to make eye contact, her mother staring blankly ahead, and then LES, her lips quivering, and that reaction there, how she's emotionally distraught from this interaction. And then the bottom row of panels has a couple different things going on, really. It's overlapping space, where if there were only a single action or a single frame to be looking at for this scene, for what the nurse is doing here, they could all be connected and it would be showing pretty much the same space. There's a little bit of intersection between what's going on here, just how it ultimately came out, or how I was ultimately able to frame it there. But for the most part, they kind of connect and extend, and this shows just the nurse stepping forward, pulling the chair out, sitting down at the keyboard, and the computer there, the old CRT monitor computer, and her clicking on the word icon. And this is meant to feel very stop motion animation like, is kind of how I describe it. There are a few different ways to do this type of scene. I'm personally a fan of this approach, where you break up a single scene, a single background into multiple panels, so you can just redraw the character within them, doing different things. You're able to effectively put multiple actions within one panel, which is otherwise impossible. Some artists and plotters will do it where they'll just keep it one single panel and have a character moving from space to space to space, and that tends to be a little bit sloppier, or it can be a little bit harder to do. I'm thinking of something like let's say the Flash is running, talking character to character to character, saving person from to person, or punch, or whatever, across a whole city street or a whole scene. And that's a bit easier because you can show the actual blur lines between each place where he stops. But for a situation like this, especially where it's mid-action, where it stops each time, I think it makes a lot more sense to break it up into multiple panels. And then at the bottom right here, we zoom in on the Microsoft Word icon and the nurse clicking on it, which sets it up for a very intuitive transition to the next page, where we see the application interface in the next panel. So I think that makes a lot of sense, or that's a very natural flip the page transition to what she's going to be typing, or what document she opens then, and what we're going to read. So that's what I wanted to talk about with regards to panel design. I talked a lot about composition, page layout, that sort of thing, those elements as well, but ultimately there were different, what I focused on here, what I think really made these instances shine, or made it possible to create those those page layouts and compose these scenes like they are within the panels, was because of what I did with these panels, where I put them on the page vertically, horizontally, no panel lines at all. And yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about that, and a little bit of insight and a progression of what I've been learning, and how I've been able to figure out more tools in my storytelling toolbox to better create a dynamic or sequential storytelling scene that the reader's eyes can naturally follow, as I intend the scene to be consumed, or to be read, without necessarily having the timing capabilities of editing video, for example. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Again, Juniper's Long Day and Uptown Undertale, you can get over at Gumroad. That's gumroad.com/StuffPopComics. I have more art in process pictures over my Instagram. That's instagram.com/StuffPopComics. And I do a conspiracy podcast on the side. That's OK Hear Me Out, OKHMO on Apple Podcasts, or you can just go over to stuffpop.com/OK. Everything is down in the description. And we've reached the happily ever after of this video. Have a good day.